Season 1, Episode 12. We're back after the August long weekend with Kat Lesperance of The Sensible Marketer. We're talking about one of our favorite subjects, marketing. Specifically, how to evoke an emotional response in people and priming them to buy. Kat takes us through becoming an accidental entrepreneur, her passion for marketing, and making a difference for her clients. We talk about artificial intelligence, target messaging, the importance of your value proposition, how to increase your response rates, what you can do to be a rebel, and it wouldn't be a RebelRebel podcast if we didn't find out what her favorite reality TV shows were. I'm your host, Michael Dean Dargy, Season 1, Episode 12, Evoking Emotion in Marketing on RebelRebel. Hey, we're sitting here in the Kensington studio. I've got Kat Lesperance sitting here with me. She is head of Sensible Marketer and many other things.
You bet. Keep a lot of busy summers going on, keeping up with all the things that are happening in the marketing world, running a busy household, just
non-stop.
The usual, right?
Yeah.
So just being an entrepreneur, trying to juggle life and your sanity at the same time.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So how old is Sensible Marketer?
You know what? I'm actually coming up on a year.
Wow, year
just
one.
Fresh. Yeah.
Nice.
I had to do my books. That was always an experience. Oh. So as a marketer, counting's not my thing.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, so got through that, and yeah, it's 1 year on the 13th.
Very nice. I'm just going to call something out here because we've got some construction still happening next door.
Yes.
If you follow this podcast at all, you'll always hear these guys building next to me. At the most inconvenient times, they will go away for a week and do nothing. But as soon as I've got a podcast, they show up and start building.
Yep, that's how it goes, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. So how did you get started in marketing? Like, what was the impetus?
In marketing, I think for my whole life, I've always loved understanding what drives people. And I think my venture first into wanting to do business was actually grade 9, believe it or not.
Wow.
We had to do one of those classes where you had to run a business during the lunch hour. And it was a business class. They taught you, that was a big thing that you had to do. You also had to play the stock market.
Wow.
You had to select $1,000 worth of stocks and then track them over time. Clearly, we did not get the money to invest in those stocks. But you had to learn how to write checks. You had to learn how to do PowerPoint. And this was, not to date myself, a few years ago.
What school was this?
This was in Brébeuf.
Oh, okay. So like a public school.
Yeah.
That's great.
So that kind of started getting my appetite into, I really like this. I really like seeing how the world works and seeing what drives people. And over time, it's, I'm always very curious. Yeah. Curiosity killed the cat. So it's something of just learning how people respond, how people act, and the little things that you can put out there that can change behavior so much, right? It's just really interesting to see that dynamic at work.
Yeah.
And as we know today with all the technology, the world is constantly changing and our audiences are becoming more fragmented, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So it's how do you get your message in front of those people?
Yeah.
How do you get them to react to it?
Yeah.
And even what happens when things go wrong and how do you deal with those pieces as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's such a fascinating world for me, and that's where it's I love just digging into that.
Well, that's cool. So what were you doing before you got to Sensible Marketer? Because you're only a year old.
Yeah, so I was working all my life client side.
Okay.
I've been in marketing for over 13 years now.
Gotcha.
And what ended up happening was I was working for the telecommunications industry for basically 10 years.
Okay.
When I got back from my mat leave, I was laid off 4 months later.
Oh.
And so it was really interesting because I think, you don't want to say this about people, but it's you really want people to be laid off once in their life.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's a really good experience. It's so eye-opening that your life is not your career. And it's a really tough phase to go through. But everyone I've seen in the same boat has come out so much stronger.
Right.
And done amazing things afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And so what was interesting was, I was laid off. And of course, I'm doing the thing of okay, got to find a job. I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. I've got to find something stable. I've got to find something quick, right?
Yeah.
So applying. And in the meantime, I started reaching out to some of the people I knew.
Yeah.
And as I was networking and talking to people, one of them had said, hey, have you ever thought of doing some contract work?
Oh.
And my initial response was no.
Yeah.
I'm a mom. I have to get a full-time job. I have to be 9 to 5,
right.
Work-life balance, all these
security,
things, right?
Blah, blah, blah.
Security, yeah.
Yeah.
And so then he kind of kept asking me every now and then, right? And I said, you know what? I'll give it a shot, but I'm still going to look for full-time, right? I still had it in my head. I got to go full-time.
Yeah.
And over the time, it was great because he brought me into this company. I pitched the vice president, and lo and behold, I got my first contract within 2 months from that pitch, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And that was 2 months after having been laid off, and it was more successful than my search and foray into the full-time world.
Wow.
So it worked out really good, and I thought, it's funny because people called me an accidental entrepreneur, right?
That should be your first book.
Yes, right? I should maybe title it that. And, I thought, okay, I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to see how this is, because after that moment in time, it's interesting that you start looking at things differently, right?
Yeah.
Here I was thinking, I've got to have a full-time job. It's more secure. I need the work-life balance.
Right.
And yet being in this world as a consultant, running my own business,
Yeah.
I have that, right?
Yeah.
So I was laid off of a job that I'd been at for 5 years.
Yeah.
And, just from returning from mat leave, and the decision was made 1 month in when I was back. Yeah. So that's not stability, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, if you're not controlling your own stuff, there's no stability there whatsoever.
No, it's kind of that false sense of it, right? And it's kind of that conventional thinking of, I need to work 9 to 5, I need to work Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, well, is that really stable? And then, too, everyone says, you're going to be a consultant. You're going to be working long hours. You're going to, not have a family life. You're not going to see your kids. You're not going to see your husband.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I've actually been able to be working part-time hours for the same, actually more in salary than what I was making before. And I've had that time. I've had more time with my kids. I'm able to, have breakfast with them in the morning and then head off to work. So I have a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
It's just not a normal structured type of role, right? Yeah. So it's been a lot to adjust to.
Yeah.
But it's funny how your mind flips, and it's like, well, you know what? You're right. Maybe there are days that I am going to work long hours, but guess what? I get paid for them. Yeah. Right? When you're working full time,
exactly.
You're working long hours, but you don't necessarily get the pay, right? Yeah. So it's different, and it's uncomfortable at first. Yeah. But it's also quite rewarding in itself too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you're why don't you give me like a sort of an idea of what you do for clients? Because I'm really interested.
Yeah. So again, I'm kind of one of those people that through marketing, when I was working client side, I was involved in a lot of different pieces. Yeah. What it always comes down to, though, is I tend to always be managing the customer base. Okay. So looking at how do I acquire more clients? How do I grow my base? Right. Then once I get those clients, how do I increase their share of wallet? How do I get more money from them, right? And then as well, do I have a problem that they're leaving? Because if they're leaving, I got to figure out how to keep them, right? So in my field, what I do is I do a lot of what's called direct marketing. So that's your email marketing. That's your direct mail. Yeah. A lot of people think it's dead. It's not. Yeah. Even social media is starting to have direct messaging approaches in it. For sure. So it's anything that can communicate with those clients to bring them in. Marketing too, it's, a lot of people think of it as advertising, that, hey, you're going to have ads out on radio and all these kind of things. You might. It depends on what you're trying to do. But there's also the science piece behind it of what does your pricing look like? How are you doing your pricing models? How are you, doing predictive modeling to understand who's going to be leaving you soon? Right. And what triggers do you pull with that? So at this point in time, with some of my bigger enterprise clients, what I do is a lot of kind of data mining, looking at how do they get better access to data, how do we use that data and implement it in their marketing strategies today. So all the advertising they're doing, how do we make sure we have it to the right target? How do we make sure we have the right messaging? How do we pull in research? Because what we're seeing is there's a lot of shift right now from product marketing, where it's, hey, this is what I sell. This is what it does. I'm amazing, right? Yeah.
Finger guns.
Yeah, you want to buy this. I got a deal for you. But it's really turning into this customer-centric view of how do I tell people that this is going to solve their problems, right? So, the example I use is internet, right? We don't want to talk about how fast it is. Yes, that's a feature of it. That's a product feature. Yeah. But you want to talk about what it does for the person, right? You want to talk about what their experience is and why it's going to be better. Yeah. And the fast part is just an attribute, but that's not the key part of it, right?
Yeah. So when you're talking about, what's the word I'm looking for? Markets that are saturated like that. Yes. They're commoditized. They're, really Shaw and Telus, maybe Bell, like if we're just dropping names of, companies that do that sort of work. Yeah. It's a commodity and they're fighting for the lowest dollar. Although I think it's more of like a duopoly where they keep the price where they want it. But I guess my point is, did they go after service as a founding feature?
Service is a huge differentiator, and you're seeing that come out in everything marketing. You know, I was just seeing in an article that was online about how the CMO is really looking at having to be tied to the data, because experience is really everything, right? So much of what we have today, there are substitute products out there. There are pieces that you could say, okay, well, if I have this product, I could go to the competitors and it would function the same, right? I think there was an example I heard at a conference long ago about car engines, right? And that really, car engines, there's kind of a basic piece to it.
Sure.
And there's maybe a few other, like I think there was like 8 maybe differentiators between them, they said at the time.
Yeah.
But really, what they're marketing differently is the cup holders or the conveniences of the car, right? Because the engine is really not that different.
Or how it's
right?
going to make, you know, people look at you.
Yeah,
how
it's
you're
the
gonna feel about
status, it's
yourself.
the brand,
Yeah.
right? And so all of those things are huge. And what's it's coming down to now is service is becoming the biggest differentiator, right? And that's where you're seeing everything becoming about, you know, the strongest marketing is going to be what's personalized, what's timely, and what's relevant to me.
So interestingly, like I get these calls every once in a while from, and they could be from Mumbai or someplace, obviously not in Canada, but they're, you know, from Shaw, for example, and they're asking about my customer experience. So they're outsourcing all this stuff, or they're sending me a promotion, and it's obviously, you know, a redialer somewhere in the Philippines, for example. And that to me doesn't say service and they value me. It's, you know, when I call and we are so used to now going into this phone queue of pressing buttons to talk to an actual human. And I'm dating myself, but I remember a time when you could actually pick up the phone and call and get a person right away who would then direct you to the right place to go.
Absolutely. And I think that's where you're seeing so many of these shifts, right? I think first, people are saying, how do we help people self-serve? Because in a lot of cases, people don't want to even talk to somebody. They want to try and figure it out on their own.
Yeah,
right?
Okay.
So how do we get those pieces up online for the online help centers, you know, even the chat bots, all those kind of things that can perhaps help.
Yeah.
The
chat bots.
Yeah. Those are a whole other story.
Yeah.
But, you know, the problem is that we haven't really figured these things out. Like we hear all these big, great, sexy stories of like, oh, artificial intelligence. We hear all these stories about, you know, we're doing what's right for the customer, but we're still figuring it out, right? A lot of times we're figuring out like one piece versus the whole customer journey, right? It's too hard to take it all on. Yeah. And, you know, outsourcing, I mean, there is a business function to it, right? You've got to lower some of your costs, lower some of your overhead. What training is involved there? But what calls are you driving to there, right? Like there's certain stages that you want to do. There's certain levels of cues that you want to do, right? There's a huge science behind it, right? And clearly we've got work to do if people are still not experiencing it. But it is something to talk about, you know, just that human interaction as we are getting so involved in technology. Yeah. And I was at an event with the CMA just the other night, and Dave Mowat was speaking, and he said, you know, we implemented this new technology. Customers were mad at us at ATB. And what he ended up doing was they ended up putting signs by the bank tellers. And they said, don't get mad at the bank teller. They're trying to do their job. We implemented this new technology that's making their life a little difficult.
Oh, that's
Call Dave. Yeah. Call Dave. And they put his phone number on it. And so he goes, you know, it was hilarious because people would call me clearly upset. Yeah. And they were surprised when he answered the phone, right? There was no cue. It was actually his phone number.
Way to go, ATB.
Yeah, right? Like, those are those experiences that stand out. They think, okay, you know, it's going to deflate the person of like, okay, I was so angry, but then it's like, oh,
it's Dave.
I feel better, right? Yeah, like, it is Dave. He's true, right? Yeah. And so I think those are the experiences that are going to start breaking out more and more. But you have to make sure you time it correctly, right? You can't have everybody calling Dave. Because Dave's got work to do, although now he's retired. But
he's just a call center now.
Yeah, he's just taking calls.
1-800-CALL Dave.
Exactly, he'll solve your issues. But it's one of those things that we can't lose that human side to it. Yeah. But there's times where you can place technology in there to kind of distance it and to offload your costs and to balance out those pieces. But how do you keep an eye to the customer experience? Right. Because you can't remove it from everything, right?
Yeah. Is this something that's only available to enterprise level, or can like small guys do this too?
that's where I'm starting to work with some of my small business clients.
Yeah.
I remember one person I went and I talked to, and I started saying, hey, let's look at your marketing plan. And she was looking for some help. And one of the things she had talked about was building an email program. I said, great, let me know what your clients look like. And she goes, oh yeah, I gave another marketer my client list. And my jaw probably dropped there in terms of, what do you mean you don't have your client list, right? And I think with, everyone, when they start their businesses, they're so focused on, okay, got to hit the ground running, got to go hard, that they lose sight of some of these really critical things, right? Such as keeping good records of your clients.
Yeah, your list is king.
Your list is huge. And so there's actually a lot of free tools out there that can help entrepreneurs start organizing themselves and building up these CRM type efficiencies and also just communications, right?
Yeah. Did you want to throw out a couple?
Yeah. So HubSpot, for instance, is a good one.
Okay. I'll put links in the description here too.
Yeah, for sure. And HubSpot is, it's a free tool that you can start with. You obviously can upgrade as you go. And in it, you can store your contacts. They make it really easy that you don't actually have to go into the software every time. You can connect it to your email inbox, and you can log your conversations that way.
Oh, cool.
It's super great. And as a marketer, anytime I talk to somebody, I say, okay, where's your customer data? Because even social media, right? Everyone's so hot about social media. I've got to be on social.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be actually paying for advertising, don't do the mistake of just going on there and throwing money at it and saying, just go after whoever. I need somebody to pay for my service. Yeah. You can target. You can upload your customer list. You can actually say, find people who look like this. Yeah. Right?
Isn't that interesting? And I didn't mean to interrupt there, but like I do stuff, right?
I hope you do stuff.
Yeah, I do stuff. And one of the stuffs that I did is go into Facebook and do some Facebook advertising, not just boosting posts, and then you can build an audience based on their data, their client list, basically, which is us. Yeah. Right? Because if you don't pay for the service, you're the service.
Exactly. Yeah.
So is it the same thing? So I can actually use my own list of people that I target.
Absolutely.
That's
and
great.
So you can do a few things, right? So what you can do is, let's say you have 100 customers and you have their phone numbers or emails. You might not even have their emails. You might have just their phone numbers. Yeah. You can upload it to a lot of these sites, and they'll hash it. They'll do all these things. And then what you can say is, this is my customer list. Maybe you actually want to market a message directly to them. So you could just say, just show these customers.
Okay, so you segment your...
Yeah, you segment your messaging, right? Yeah. You could say, you know what, these are my customers. These are the good ones. So try and find me customers who look like this. But don't market to these guys, right? Like don't make me pay for customers I already have. And so doing that, you can actually start targeting your messaging better. Yeah. You can have a better chance so that you're not just hitting everybody in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And if I'm coming in and I'm consulting with a small business, for instance, they're going to save money by being able to educate me quickly on who their customers are. Because the two biggest questions I come in, especially with entrepreneurs dealing with them, is saying, who is your target market? And what is your value proposition? Right? And you'll be surprised at how many stunned looks I get because it's a struggle to answer those things when you're so busy trying to run your business.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And for me, that's your critical piece, right? Yeah. And it's not what do you sell? It's your value proposition. How do you stand out, right? Yeah. Why would I choose you over your competitors? Yeah. And a lot of these entrepreneurs, I kind of get some of the deer in the headlights because... well, you should just buy my product. You should just try it. Right. And it's like, no, when you're doing marketing, you have to sell the reason why somebody should. Right? Yeah.
You got to have the hook.
You have to move your people. You have to give somebody a reason enough to try you. Yeah. Because everyone's so busy and being inundated with messages, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
What do you think of like split testing, like doing A/B testing on marketing pieces?
I love it. Yeah. I think you have to do it. So for one of my clients right now, we're doing email campaigns, and it was funny because when I came in and when I started working, they were like, nope, you know what? We've done a lot of subject line testing. We're good, for instance, right? And I said, okay, but it's included, right? Yeah. You have the software that does it. Yeah. So if you're not running a test, I'll just always throw in a subject line A/B test, right? Yeah. And so when I started doing that, I started showing them. I had one campaign go out, and I think I had on subject line A, I had like 12% open rate. Okay. Subject line B, I had like a 24% open rate, right? Wow. So it's just like. And when you do your A/B testing, what you can do is you can always say, like normally how I set it up is if I have 100% of my list, I set my A/B testing for 20%.
Oh, okay.
And then whatever is the winning piece, I send out the rest of it.
I was about to ask how you're going to tackle that.
Right.
Because that's one of the things I think people get confused about is like, well, then I'm going to get it 50% wrong.
No, so that's where, I'm a millennial and I love to always have things like right this second, but you have to have that patience, right?
Yeah.
With email, for instance, you get your results within a day.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Email is so fast. It's amazing. Yeah. So it's always worth the time to just set up that extra little bit of time, because that open rate can be huge, right? Yeah. It can be that many more customers looking at your email. It can be that many more customers that you're converting, because it all becomes down to the funnel, right?
Yeah, totally.
So for me, A/B testing is a must, because as well, you learn about your customers. Yeah. So one campaign we did, we were doing an outbound calling campaign, and it was fascinating because the slightest things can make a big difference. Right. And so we were calling people who were coming up to the end of a promotion. And we had some of the people calling, they're like, when I call these customers, it just gets into a really tough call, right? Because we're reminding them that the promotion's ending and they're upset about it. They want another deal, right? And so what ended up happening was we started looking at what they were saying and who was having a better success rate than the other people on the team. Yeah.
Oh, Newton's got something to say here.
Oh,
too.
Newton's quite upset about his promotion, I hear. And so what was so fascinating is that the reps who were outbound calling and saying, your promotion your introductory offer is coming to an end, had a better success rate than people saying your promotion is expiring.
What? Interesting.
And so as we did that test, like again, these aren't things that have to take a year for you to find out. This is really within a few, 20 to 100 calls, you're going to find this out pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
And so just those slight nuances get you in a very different discussion. By saying introductory offer, people realize, okay, this was the offer I got to start. I don't necessarily get promotions ongoing, right? Yeah. When you say promotion, people are like, oh, just give me the next one, right? I'm good.
Oh, the psychology.
Exactly. So that's the stuff I love, right? Just seeing, okay, the smallest thing can really change. Same with your subject lines, right? Just putting it a little bit different. Direct mail, we also did a lot of testing on that. And
I love direct mail.
Direct mail is fascinating because everyone always thinks, I had another entrepreneur talk to me not long ago. He goes, look at this sexy flyer I made, right? He goes, I've got this sexy flyer and I'm going to send it out with this letter. What do you think, right? And I said, don't do the flyer. Don't put the flyer in. Direct mail is kind of the opposite of what we think. People don't want to be sold. Yeah. If you can just print your letter in black and white and, as a marketer, I hate to say it, but without any branding on it, just really black and white, even just write it by hand, you'll get better response rates, right? And he ended up not doing the flyer, doing that. He asked me about Post-it notes. And I said, yes, put a Post-it on it and make it look like you hand wrote it. Oh. And he said he got so much feedback on that. Really? And he even said, I had people actually taking the Post-it notes and putting it on the fridge, right? And all these kind of things because you feel personal.
Yeah, totally.
And, he was so great because he found out about this Post-it note thing. And he was an entrepreneur just starting. Yeah. He found a printer that could print it to make it look like handwriting. And there was a blog that told him how to set it all up and everything. Wow. And he did it, right? So again, these aren't practices that you have to be a big, massive business to do. Yeah. You can be the small guys, right? You're going to have to hustle. You're going to have to put a little extra work into it, but it's there.
Yeah. Knowing not even what questions to ask, but putting it out there. And I think just having that subtle guidance to be like, get rid of that, keep this, make it personalized and let him run with it. That's fantastic. Yeah.
And there's so many little things, right? So it's quite... That's what marketing is great. And that's where, again, you don't have to have a big, massive, multi-million-dollar budget. You don't have to have a team of 50 people behind you to do these things. These are things that you can do yourself, right?
Right.
So it's a great world to be in.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you feel that we're living in the future right now? Is that?
I feel like... You know what? I find it interesting because I find there's a lot of articles out there that talk about the future, about AI, right? And I know there was many sleepless nights I had of like, automation's going to take over the world. I'm going to lose my job, all these kind of things. But I think we're looking at so far into the future, but we don't realize that a lot of companies aren't there yet. Right. Right? We're playing with things, but, back to this thing about the data, so many companies are always about how do I build more products? How do I get further ahead, right? We need more products to get more customers, to get more revenue share. that the data always gets left behind. And in this world of, all these things about AI and all these bots and everything, it looks really sexy at the front.
Yeah.
But there's a huge gap in between that place and where we are today.
Right.
So I think it's coming.
Yeah, the gap is closing for sure. You can feel it.
It's closing, yeah. And I think that's where it'll be really interesting to see what comes down the road. They talk about this being like the next industrial revolution, right? Of all this technology that's coming. And you see McKinsey putting out all these articles about, it's going to take over and all these jobs are at risk. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, it's just another wave. Do you know what I mean? It's just another wave that you're going to have to learn new skill sets to adapt.
The internet, the advent of the internet could be seen as, as we know it today, certainly could be seen that way. The virtual reality and augmented reality stuff that's coming down.
Yeah.
I mean, this will all create new opportunities in ways that we didn't even imagine.
For sure.
I suspect.
But I think, too, it'll also cause so much more fragmentation, right? And I think that's where it's very difficult because everything is becoming so split, so fragmented. Like even in marketing, you can't be an expert on everything, right? There's so much happening in this world. It's so difficult. So that's where it's, will there be a point that we need to flip back to basics, right? Like come back to a centralized view of all of this because it's just so much going on. And at the end of the day, people are creatures of habits, right? So it's kind of
right. And we're people.
Exactly.
And I think that's the other thing that we have to, it's weird that we have to remind ourselves that we're people. This is a human experience that we're in right now.
Absolutely.
And will continue to be so. Even with this new technology and stuff, we're still humans at the end of the day. We want to be loved.
And we're not changing the way we think necessarily, right? We still are run by the emotions, by the irrational, So my husband, he's hilarious because he's an IT guy. He loves automation. He's like automating our home and doing all this technology stuff that drives me crazy. But, at the end of the day, we're still making decisions the same way we made decisions 10 years ago. Technology is there to, help us, all those kind of things. Yeah. But I don't think we can necessarily remove ourselves from everything. Yeah. And so that's where it'll just be interesting to see how our roles shift and how those change. Even with these automations and all these kind of things that I'm working with different companies, you still need that person to check, right? Because we had an example of somebody who was working in a telecommunications in China. And he was saying, he was a data scientist. They were running all these computations and all these fancy things that are well beyond my knowledge. Yeah. And he goes, there was something not right. And so they had to actually go to the call center and say, tell us what's happening. And the call center answers explain what was going wrong, right?
So they intuited it.
Yeah, there was just something that wasn't going right. So it's, at the end of the day, no matter how smart these computers are, they can't necessarily capture everything, right? And that's where, for me, if I talk to the people who are dealing with customers, if I talk to the sales teams, they have way more knowledge than what my back-end system's going to have because they have those conversations from those people who are making those buying decisions. Right. That they can't plug in to a CRM or they can't plug into data, right?
It's the nuance of how they said it or how quickly they responded back, like all these variables that mean nothing but everything at the same time.
Totally, because you're dealing with people who aren't making rational decisions all the time, right? Yeah. So that's where, for me, it's always gold to go to the salespeople, to go to your call centers, to go to, people who are providing a service in your home, anything like that. Yeah. You have to hear from them and you have to be connected to them because they are a gold mine for information, whether it's how you're going to message things, problems. If a marketing campaign goes wrong, those people are the first ones that are going to be on your case, right?
So, without question.
Exactly. So you always have to keep really tied to them. And that's all the people side, right? Because they're dealing with people, but they're probably only capturing maybe 20% of those conversations they're having with them.
Yeah. Okay. Weird question out of left field.
Yeah. Hit me.
Got two prices. $79 and $89.
Okay.
And we want to increase that price. No, let's call it $75 and $85.
Oh, okay.
Now we want to increase those prices.
Yeah.
Would it be $79 and $89 or would it be $80 and $90?
Oh, are you asking the psychology behind the .99?
Is the .99, and maybe we won't even do the .99. We'll just do the 79 with the dollar under.
Yeah.
Is that, and I'm couching this for a reason. Is the psychology still valid?
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that came about long ago.
Yeah.
For me, what I would say, I think we do it as a standard practice still.
Right.
Because we're used to it and we think there's some psychology behind it.
It's part of the zeitgeist of what we expect.
Exactly. For me personally, I would say I would have to look at your data, right?
Yeah, okay.
I would have to look at, because you know what? I might actually come in and tell you, you are way underpriced.
Right.
Put it to 90, it might end up buying 96, 97, right? At the end of the day, I think your customers, again, if it's a one-time product, if it's a service product that you're billed monthly, there's differences there.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the value behind it.
Right.
Right?
So it's not the number, although some people, if people are choosing based on a number, then probably you're not getting the right people.
It could be. And that's where, we had, there was some research I saw, and it was saying that people don't judge a product necessarily by the price, they judge it by the value.
Right.
And then the value influences how they feel about the price.
Right.
So
that's great.
If you're not validating what your value is,
right,
it doesn't matter what you put your price point at.
Yeah.
Right?
That's awesome.
So for me, that's where you really got to understand, how are people looking at it?
Yeah.
I know from a lot of things. I had another company I was talking to, one of my friends, and they run a painting company. And it was interesting because as we were talking, I was like, you sound really busy. Oh yeah, we're so busy, so busy. I'm like, have you thought about increasing your rates? maybe you're underpricing. And I think, especially as entrepreneurs, we tend to underprice ourselves so much.
Oh, sure.
Because sometimes we're like, we don't have the confidence necessarily. We're competing against big guys. You're trying to get the market share. But you really need to understand what your value is. And that's where I always ask you, what's your value proposition?
Yeah.
Right? Don't tell me about your product and what you charge.
Yeah.
Tell me what your value proposition is, because you're always going to find a market, right? I mean, Starbucks charging $5 for coffee versus Tim Hortons versus McDonald's, right?
Yeah. Blew the world away at the time. Like, what? You can't do that. And then suddenly, oh, wait a minute, you can do that?
Yeah, and suddenly everyone's doing it, right? Suddenly everyone wants that luxury that they can afford daily.
Yeah.
So that's where, for me, it's not necessarily what the number is you're putting behind it. It's what is the market dictating, right? Yeah. Are you completely out of line with what your competitors are charging?
Right.
And then how are you actually positioning that price point?
Right.
And at what time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, funeral homes, those are a great one where it's like, you know what? I think when we had to arrange a funeral, there was like a pot and a plant. I couldn't remember the price, but it was astronomical. And I'm like, I think this is from IKEA, right? Like, but it's that moment in time where you're not fussed about it, right? Because you're going through an emotional experience. You're not necessarily shopping around for price points on flowers, all those kind of things, right?
So sketchy.
This is where it's all about the state that people are in when they're purchasing, right?
Yeah.
And
that's a great tip. Just as a consumer, to just recognize the state that you're in when you're purchasing. Totally.
A lot of our buys are emotional, right? Again, I go back to my husband. He loves those socks from the cereal boxes. And I actually put out a post of, I wish cereal marketers would stop taking advantage of 35-year-old men with their sock campaign, because he came home with like 5 boxes because he just wanted the socks, right?
Oh my God.
So
that's awesome. I do a sock of the month club.
Oh, please don't tell him.
Oh, it's genius. It's amazing.
I think men don't get to accessorize like women do, so socks are really the go-to,
socks
right?
Are my thing. Yeah.
Yeah, same with him. He's got unicorn socks. He's got everything. So
we should talk.
Don't
Sock
whatever
talk.
you do,
a new
do
podcast.
Not contribute it. Sock talk.
Sock talk. I'm gonna start it. Oh my God.
Yeah, you'll have to describe them, where you get them from. But no, and it's just it's those things that, again, that's where a lot of us don't make rational buys, right? Or we aren't, it depends what mood your customer is in. So that's where I wouldn't get too focused on, is it $0.9 or is it $1?
Yeah.
I mean, I think too, we're so exposed to having GST or HST or PST added to it. So it's not going to be the price at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
But there, again too, there might be some markets where it comes into play, like real estate, right?
Yeah.
If you're under the 100,000 mark, you have a very different buyer than perhaps if you're going the 100,000 to $249.99, right? So that's where you need to look at, where is your price point falling into for your buyer.
Yeah. Identifying your buyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah.
I love this stuff.
That's where I just can keep talking about these things all day because it's so fascinating. But it all comes down to people, right?
Yeah.
And thinking about how you buy, how your customer is going to buy, and
What do you do for design? Like, are you a designer as well, or do you farm that out?
Usually I farm it out. I'm not a designer. I like to think I am, but I'm really not.
Yeah.
So for me, it's, I'll have a concept. This is where, again, through a lot of the work we do, I'm used to doing a lot of the briefs, and I will guide the design of where I want it to go, the look and feel, or again, because it has to come from the research, right?
Yeah, totally.
You can have a really kick-ass designer, but it's really got to resonate with the target audience.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where, I think even with direct mail, with email, you could do amazing things with it, right? I've seen direct mail where it's like, oh, it folds into a little car and then it can pop up into a little car, right? But if my budget doesn't cater for that, if my message is lost in it, it's a cool fold up, but it didn't do the job of selling.
Right.
Right. And so there's those things, but I love like the simplicity of really great marketing. There's one that stood out for me from the Cannes Festival several years ago, I think now. And it was a direct mailer. It was done in Europe. And it was like a white envelope. Again, white envelopes are going to get you some of your best results versus doing a self-mailer, those things. And it was so simple. What it was is just had the client's name and address on the front. And it was ripped. At the top right-hand side, it was ripped. So then you got this direct mailer, you open it, and you read it, and it says, if you feel that this was if you felt that kind of gut wrench of like somebody's been looking at my mail, think of how you'd feel if somebody broke into your home. And it was it was mail for your home, right?
Brilliant.
So think of the emotion that you're invoking. Someone like, who opened my mail? Who's reading my mail, right? And you don't know what it is because it's not marked.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Canada will let us do that, sending envelopes like that. But those things to me are, wow, like those blow my mind, right?
Yeah.
Because you were able to create that emotion in somebody. Yeah. So that's kind of the direction I want with some of the creative I do. Some of it, sometimes it's like creative, we can keep it really templated. We can keep it really simple.
Totally.
We can do it in Canva. We can do all those kind of things. There's some low budgets that you have to work with, right?
Sorry, Guy Kawasaki. I know he's a big guy with Canva, but no.
Yeah. But there's some tools that, again, I think the smaller entrepreneurs with those tighter budgets,
I get it.
You've got to hustle. You've got to get something out there, right?
Yeah.
And make it look as good as you can.
Commoditized design bothers me tremendously.
Yeah, you are the creative, right?
Yeah, well, and I mean, I don't say it's not. There's no place for it. I find it bothersome, and maybe more so because it's possible. Like Canva does make this stuff very possible, very accessible.
It does, yeah.
Fiverr the same way. Logo turning.
Oh, Fiverr's a whole
like
other
that.
story.
Yeah,
I mean and I think that's where a lot of people turn to. But it's interesting too because I find some of the entrepreneurs. I had another entrepreneur from one of my self-employment courses that I went through. And she was hilarious because she goes, hey, as a marketer, I need to ask your opinion on something. So she lays out her logos and she's looking at her sheets as she's talking to me and I'm just reading her face. And she's like, what do you think of this? And I was like, why are you asking me? Because you hate it. I can see it in your face. You hate this and you're unhappy with it. Yeah. So why are you asking me to try and convince you that you like something that you don't like?
Right. Or to validate maybe that you don't like it either.
Yeah. Right. And she's like, yeah, I can't stand it. And I mean, she outsourced it to somebody, in a different country, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And she's just like, I don't know what to do. So that's where it's just like, demand what you want. Go to them, explain what happened, work with them, right? Yeah. But you've got to be happy with your design. So I think when you're on that tighter budget, it is harder to work with sometimes because, even for myself, I'm not that creatively inclined either, right? Yeah. Those kind of things, you got to figure it out, but you still got to push forward at the end of the day, right? Yeah. Not everything has to be award-winning, right? You're not going to have necessarily the most award-winning logo, but at the same time, too, that's where you have to justify what investment you're doing, right?
Totally. Yeah, and a lot of conversations I have come around actually corporate maturity.
Yeah.
So how far along does your company look?
Yeah.
Because if you have like a $5 logo, you can tell. Like
absolutely. You're better off without one.
Right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you have a $5,000 logo, and a color palette and typography that you use consistently, suddenly you look like you've been around for probably a lot longer than you actually have.
Absolutely. Well, that was some advice I got from my sister. My sister's she's an artist, but she's done graphic design. She's doing 3D modeling and all these things, and she's out in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And so I called her and I said, Karen, I'm a marketer. I need to have a logo. I need a logo. Right? And so she's talking to me, and I was early in my journey. Like, I'm still early in my journey.
Yeah.
And she's like, you don't know what you necessarily want right now. Because she was throwing out ideas. And I'm like, no, it's not quite that. It's not quite this. And she goes, look, you already have clients.
Yeah.
The logo is not going to hold you back.
Yeah.
Now's not the right time for it. So she's like, choose a type font you like.
Yep.
Go with that. And just don't worry about the logo at the moment, right?
Yeah.
And again, my heart stopped a little bit as I'm a marketer. How can I go out there with that logo, right? But it made sense. And again, that's not where I invest in my money, right? You've got to invest your money into the marketing tactic that makes sense. So, a lot of entrepreneurs seem to start with, I've got to get my website, my logo, and get those things in place, and my social media marketing,
and
right?
social,
And yes, website, I think you need it. Do you need a $10,000 website?
Probably not.
Probably not, unless you've got something else going on.
But maybe not a Wix either. Like, I've got some opinions on those ones.
I can see the look on your face, right?
Well, yeah, because you can tell. Like, when I hit those sites, I'm just like, okay. And I'm not saying they're terrible. I'm just saying I get it. Like, I understand you're in this budget frame, which for me, then equates to a bunch of other things, a bunch of other ways that I interact with that brand now will be different.
Yeah, and it says a lot about you, right? Whatever you're putting out there. So it's, you might want to invest perhaps in a website, all those kind of things. Being online is critically important.
Sure.
But to what level, right? Do you need a $10,000 website? Do you need to find somebody who has some decent design and can at least get you there? Or do you plan for growth, within a few months, right? Is it just kind of your online business card?
Yeah.
And then you don't have to do it all day one, right?
Right, yeah. Well, and, there's lots of great templates out there for WordPress, for example.
Yeah. Exactly.
And, I think that everything is iterative in this world that we're in right now anyways. So what you have now is not going to be what you're going to have a year from now.
No.
And don't stress about it.
Exactly. But I think, too, it's also know that there's more out there, right? So again, website, I would say you have to have a website. Again, to the degree you invest in it, it's going to be different for everyone. Yeah. Logo, I'm living proof myself. You don't need it right off the bat. So it might not be something that you want to invest in right from the get-go. Yeah. But, it's a lot of these entrepreneurs, I almost have to shake some people of like, you are your best selling feature, right? Yeah, like you are the one who needs to personnel selling. So one of these companies I'm working with, he's a toy manufacturer, and he's like, I built a website. I sunk a lot of money into it. And when he was meeting with me as his new marketer, he's kind of like, please don't come to me telling I need to do another website, right? Like, it's too soon. And so as I was talking, I said, no, you know what? You actually need to invest in collateral. Like, you need to build a catalog. You need to invest your money in these sales conversations you're having with people. Right? So that you can go in with proper materials. Exactly. Yeah. They're probably not going to come hunting to your website looking for you, right? I mean, you have some videos, that's great, all those kind of things. We'll use the website as supplement, but you need to invest your creative dollars in building sales materials, right? So
I think that's brilliant. That's just, yes.
Yeah, right? For me, it's good. These kind of things, when I come in, it's easier for me to see, but I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, you hear about the world of SEO, you hear the world about social media, and you feel, I have to do these things to just, as table stakes. Yeah. And you don't, right? Social media takes a lot of time. It takes a lot
with very money, little return, to be honest. Like, I mean, over time, yes, sure. Yeah. And it's great to be there. It's kind of like one of those staples. You just expect it to be there.
Exactly.
I look at SEO, and I won't badmouth it. Because I think that, doing SEO properly is smart. If you build a one-page website, write it like a human would read it.
Exactly.
Right? And write it in such a way that you're not going to piss off the bots that are going to visit it and shun you. Yeah. But like I've heard horror stories of $7,500 a month going into SEO for little tiny companies.
It is so common, and it breaks your heart because you're seeing these people who are they think it's the right thing to do. Someone told them it is. Yeah. And it's like, you know what? Again, this is where I go back to people might not be searching you out, right? If you're doing services, if you're doing these kind of things, you might not be top. You don't have a client list to kind of show and prove these things. You have to go out there and hit the pavement. You have to be networking. You have to go talk to people, right? Yeah. And it's those things do cost money to go to events, to build materials, to build your business cards, all those kind of things, right? Yeah. But you will have a better return than on social media in a lot of cases, right? Again, there's a time and place for social media, but some people are just sinking all their dollars into it, crossing their fingers and hoping something comes. And it's like, people need a relationship to buy from you, right? Yeah. And SEO is great. That'll help bring them to your site. but they might not convert because they don't have a relationship with you.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I do think that the search engine optimization, which is what this is for, and I get it, there's things that you put in there to come higher, and white hat practices, black hat practices, all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, if it's actually a human that gets to your website, it better resonate with them.
Absolutely. And two, it's going to take, they say that on average, it takes 6 to 7 interactions before somebody will make a purchase with you. So if you've sunk all your money into social media, they might not have an interaction with you again, right? They might have that one. Yeah,
totally. I did a talk at ATB Entrepreneur Center called the 7-Touch Exploding Brand Technique, which is a lot along this same lines that, you need to build that trust and this connection with people in order for them to want to do anything with you, buy from you, call you, anything, right? Like, and it never stops with 7.
No, right? It's always ongoing. And I think that's where it's tough, because people, when they're not experienced in marketing, they're kind of like, hey, I've done this checklist. Yeah. But it's really, how do you build an integrated plan, right? Even this person that was talking to me about the direct mail, it's like, okay, great. You're sending out a direct mail. Awesome. Yeah. What's your follow-up? Right? Don't let your tactic just go out and then sit by the phone hoping somebody, dear God, please just call me. Yeah. Are you calling back? Are you firing off messages on LinkedIn? What are you doing to go with that, right? Yeah. And because you're going to have a small net of people that will call you. Yeah. You'll have a small net of people who are interested but don't have the time, or you haven't interested them enough to call you. Yeah. But if you spoke to them, you might be able to convince them, right? Totally. And I think that's what we're always scared to do, of, picking up the phone and calling somebody, right? Yeah. And that's where social media is nice, because you can kind of hide behind like, hey, I invested, it's going. Yeah. And people are coming to my site. I see traffic happening, but you're not closing that sale with them, right?
Oh, yeah. I could talk for days about this.
This would be the longest podcast ever.
Longest podcast ever. So I've got a book on my shelf called Integrated Branding, and it was written by Parker LaPlay, which is a branding firm out of Seattle. Okay. I don't know if they're still around anymore. I worked with them back in 2000. Yeah. And it talks about that very same thing, where your brand is basically ripples through your entire company, ripples through every experience that you have with, the world. Yeah. And I think that's, super important to have. I have a client here in town that was spending a lot of money on not just SEO, but on advertising. So spending social media ad dollars to drive people to their site. Yeah. And the cool thing is they called me up and they said, hey, do you know if this is working? It feels like it's not working. So I have got access to their analytics. So I went and looked at the data. I'm just like, and when did you start this campaign? And, blah, blah, blah. And I could see as soon as the campaign started, a spike in their traffic. Yeah. That's awesome. And I said, okay, so this is happening. And they're just like, oh, great. So it's working. I said, well, yes.
Are you getting sales?
Right. And that was the question. I said, so yes, you're getting more traffic to your website. Yeah. How are your monthly sales? And how is your monthly attrition? And has that moved at all? They're just like, well, no, actually, we're kind of
the
same. Yeah. I'm saying, so you're spending all this money on advertising. You're getting all this traffic to your website, which is great. But your sales are stale. They're static. And I'm like, there's your answer right there. Is it worth the $5,000 or whatever you're paying per month to run these campaigns?
Oh, and it hurts your heart, right? When you see the look in their eyes of, it's not working. Yeah. But it is the case, right? And two, it's kind of, you've got your social media running, but what else are you doing behind it, right? Right. Where are they landing? What kind of content are they seeing?
Exactly. Right? Are you getting them in the door if you're like a place, and how's that interaction happening with the sale or your salespeople or your
what stage are they at in the funnel, right? Like, are they just kind of coming to your site and dropping off? Are they clicking around? Are they looking at some information like, hey, this could be of interest, right? And do you have the right people coming? Yeah. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I can bring traffic to anybody's site.
Yeah, sure.
But is it the right person that's coming to your site that you actually will want to have as a customer, or that's interested in your product, right? Yeah. And I think that's where the real trouble is. And again, people are just so busy trying to run their business that they think, okay, I've got this done. It should be working. Right. And then there's other fires that they have to address that they get back to, right? And that's the worst, coming in when you have to talk to them and explain to them, this might not be your best bet. We should really just stop it and look elsewhere, right? And if you don't have the time to invest in social media, right? If you're not on there answering questions, if people are replying to your posts or all those kind of things, you have to be very careful with that, because that's also a very negative impact too.
Oh, totally.
Right? So it's that whole approach. And that's where, too, I'm going to go back to that Dave Mowat conversation, because one thing I took away from him, just in terms of integrated marketing, he goes, it was interesting for him because when they're talking about ATB and when they're talking about the brand, he's evangelizing it. He's talking about this great company, all these kind of things. And then he goes, the hard part is that you look at the people who are actually the tellers, who are on the calls, all these kind of things, and they have these operating guides that are written in financial terms, right? Of if this happens, do this, da 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 da. So here's the people at the very top speaking this very, beautiful type eloquent, brand. Eloquent and all about the customer first. Waxing, and yet these operating guides are saying, if the customer has done this, do not refund them more money. If this has happened, right?
Right.
And so his thing was, your brand has to speak all the way down through to your operating guides so that your people can actually live the brand.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Because there's always that disconnect, right? And it's like operations sometimes goes away and does their thing. But, is there that time that the frontline person could just say, you know what? I get this happened. I get it was a mistake.
Yeah.
You're a great customer. We've been with us for 30 years.
Yeah.
The book's telling me I can't do this, but let me just waive those fees. Or do you know what I mean? Like, let me do the right thing by the customer, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so that's where your brand does have to live through in everything you do and all your marketing and all your approach and yourself, right?
You know what I found? Banking is a great example because one thing I'm missing right now is my relationship with my bank.
Yes.
Because I bank with RBC. RBC, if you're listening, you'll know it's me because
call him.
because you've got my voice imprint.
Yeah.
But so I used to go in all the time and I do my deposits and I do the stuff and I got to know the tellers. So when stuff like this happened, like whatever happened, like maybe I got a money order from a client.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, well, we can't release the funds right away. I'm just like, why? It's a money order. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, and I even had the duplicate and the stuff. And they're just like, well, we're not allowed to. And what she ended up doing is going to her manager saying, hey, this is Michael Dargy and this is this is a thing. And this is a client he's done work for before. We can see it. Can we figure this out for him? And they did.
Yeah.
It was outside of their process.
Yes.
And it only happened in my favor because of the relationship I built.
Yeah.
Well, now you get penalized for going to see a teller. So I pay more to do teller transactions than I do to do instant transactions.
Yeah.
So I'm missing that. But on the flip side, I can take a picture of a check with my phone and deposit it into my account.
Isn't that amazing?
And I'm just like, fuck. That's fantastic.
The rest of this can't like that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think, even like gas companies, right? Same thing where now people don't even go into the store because you can pay as you go and you can pay once you fill up. But guess what? Now they're not getting revenue from the time you'd go in and you'd buy a bag of chips or you'd buy a little extra thing, right? Yeah. So then there's a question of, okay, great, we can save costs on not having to have X amount of people now to put through all these transactions. Yeah. But now you're missing out on that revenue. Yeah. So how are you going to regain that? Because now you've just trained people to not come into the store.
Oh, yeah. Well,
right?
And so I found this in BC first because they actually had a law because one of the gas station attendants got killed or something.
I think I remember those days. Yeah, where they were talking about you had to pay in advance.
Yes. Yeah. And so I first experienced that in British Columbia. Yeah. And, one of the gas station people told me, because I brought up the same thing. I went off on this tirade. You don't even know. This poor gas guy was like, dude, okay, this is what happened. This is why it's this way. Yeah. Now it's happening in Alberta where almost every single gas station I go to has got this same pay before you fill. Yeah. And I get it from a loss prevention standpoint. I don't know whether they're using the same reasoning. Yeah. But I think you're bang on. Like, the revenue that you must be losing in those convenience stores would be astronomical.
Yeah, and they haven't adjusted to it, right? So is there a way with the data they could actually look at trying to, serve people kind of thing, right? Like how the tellers come out to your car, right? All those kind of things.
I've got a vending machine gas pump.
There you go, right? Like
so you just pick your chocolate bar and your energy drink and your gas, swipe your card, right? Fill up, have it like a pneumatic tube shoot into your car, your treats.
There you go. There is a free idea.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's kind of those things that, again, technology is great for us in reducing costs, but then what else is happening down the road, right? So those are things that it's like, you've got to know your customer. You've got to know how to cater to them. And you've got to know the impacts of what you're putting in place because it could have the adverse outcome that you want, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I'm going to switch things up on you a little.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm ready.
Tell me about your what's like maybe you're a Netflix person. I don't know. Do you like your TV shows?
So you know what? I don't tend to watch a ton of TV. Although now I'm going to go into it and you're going to be like liar. But now it's summer and this is where I get my little trashy TV shows.
Oh, okay.
I tried to remove a lot of drama from my life, so now I just need to watch it.
Okay.
in TV
What's a
form.
trashy show? What's one of your favorites?
Oh, so 90 Day Fiancé. I don't know if you've seen this one.
No idea what that is.
No, it's about people in the U.S. that get married
Yeah.
and they have to get married within 90 days for their spouse to live there because their spouse came from a different country.
Oh my God.
So drama. I'm not a Bachelor fan, but I do like Big Brother.
Okay.
Big Brother I'm into this season.
Yeah.
And I've watched a lot of them.
I'm going to show my ignorance. Is there a Canadian version?
There is, but I don't know. I've always just watched the American.
Okay.
I haven't gotten into the Canadian, which is terrible of me. Cool. And then, there's, I don't know if you've ever seen the $1 Million Listing shows.
Never.
So there's these shows about all these, real estate agents in like New York. They used to have one in LA and all these different areas. And I think because I'm in marketing, it's all about how they're marketing these massive mansions and all these really expensive homes and all the different marketing tactics they take, right?
Yeah,
so
cool.
I like to try to sound smart when I watch really terrible shows. But it really does show how you have to market things and how sometimes you might look at it and think, okay, like they're throwing parties. Like how hard is that, right? But again, they're throwing parties, but they have to invite the right people.
Exactly.
They have to have the right crowd. These parties aren't cheap, right?
Yeah.
So they really have to do that. And then they have to look at how they're going to market it internationally or how they're going to really sell these homes. So it's just fascinating to see. And then too, you get to see like these stellar condos and houses that, I hope to have one day, but who knows? So those are kind of like the shows that I love, just a little bit more of the reality TV series. Cool. On Netflix, I've had to watch a lot of Avengers for my 4-year-old son and a lot of Peppa Pig and for my daughter.
Yeah.
But I've found some of the documentaries I love.
Oh, nice.
There's one of my friends told me about. I think it's called Dirty Money.
Okay.
And again, just fascinating to see how the world works.
Yeah.
They had one on Trump. They had one on Volkswagen. Like a lot of these different things, even down to the Mexican drug trade and how it was involved with some of the major banks and whatnot. So it's just fascinating to see how things get there.
Like how they work in the...
Yeah, and just at that level of economy, how things that you think are, okay, this is completely unjust, like this should happen, but then you see that the governments, they're working at such a macro level that they have to take into account like what happens to jobs, what happens to all these things, right? Like these dynamics that you can't picture.
Yeah.
So it's so complex. And they had one even too about pharmaceuticals and all of that, right? So
crazy.
It's fascinating because it's just a world that is so beyond me.
Yeah.
But it all comes down to how people work and all the different dynamics you have to weigh, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you are obviously super busy with 3 kids.
Yes.
And your business. And I don't want to dive too much into your kids because that's personal land.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
But the kids must be so excited that you're there more. I would think.
They are. It's really funny because, again, this program is all about being the rebel. And it's, again, trying to go outside of what normal convention is. And even with my kids, I love my kids. I had 3 of them. When I took mat leave, I always left early. Like, I'm not a good mom staying at home all the time. Like, I respect all those moms who can stay at home with their kids all day because I'm like, I'm going to lose my mind if I don't talk to an adult. So, I left both my first 2 mat leaves at 6 months and I left my other mat leave at 9 months, right? Went back to work early because I just love working. I love doing this thing. But now that I have the balance of working and being able to go to their school involvement, to, take them out on a date during the day, right? One of my sons was just finished grade 1 and they do a lot of reach to the community of parents. Can you be involved and can you volunteer? Can you come and help in the classroom? And so on what they had was play day. I don't know if you remember play day back from when you were a kid.
Oh, like the
sports day.
Outdoor sports day.
Yeah, the last day of school and all you do is play games.
Yeah, I love that.
Best day ever. So when I saw they had it and they were asking for volunteers, I'm like, hands down, I have to go.
Yeah.
Right? I have to relive my own childhood through my child.
Exactly.
And, I got there and his face, like, because he saw me and he's like, guys, this is my mom. This is my mom, right? And he was just so excited. So being able to have those opportunities, and I think, again, I've seen people in the corporate world doing it too, people who are working the 9 to 5. I think there is a lot more opportunity for us now to take those times to say, you know what?
Yeah.
My daughter's having a tea party at her school. I have to go and attend it because it's for the parents, right?
Yeah.
And it's just those times where you think, okay, we're working so much more now because emails, because all those things, right? Like
it never stops.
Who's not working up until midnight some nights, right?
Yeah.
So that's where for me it's that balance of, okay, there are going to be weekends where I'm working, where I'm sitting and doing a podcast, all those kind of things. So it's okay for me to take time during the day, during the weeks, to spend that time with them, because you're not going to get it back, right?
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
But just don't stick me at home with them for 12 hours a day in the middle of a Calgary winter.
Yeah, that is so fair. I've been there.
It's a long day. It's a very long day.
That is a long day.
I would always tell my husband, I know what the dog feels like when you come home, because I'm just like, oh, I'm so excited another adult's here, right? So, exactly.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to tie this up with a nice, neat bow.
Okay, perfect.
Your journey has been fascinating because you've done the thing. You did the corporate thing.
Yeah.
You realize, which most people don't get to realize, that permanent jobs are not permanent.
No.
That if it's not under your own power, that anything can happen. I mean, anything can happen anyways, but at least this way you're totally involved in all the decisions. So for the person that's stuck in the 9 to 5 job that feels a little rebellious stir,
feels something calling inside.
Yeah, calling inside. What would you suggest? What would you recommend as a next step?
You know, because I've actually had some people ask me, and I think you have to listen to what is going on. You have to have, if you're married, if you're with kids, similar in my situation, you need the right support, right? I tell people my husband is an amazing support system for me.
Yeah.
Because he's the one who gives my head a shake, right? When I have my low days, because it's a roller coaster, right? Every day you can have your highs, you can have your lows. And, you know, I remember having a conversation with him where I was just like, oh, like, you know, I was coming up to my year end and I was working at my forecast, and I said, you know, I'm coming short of my goal that I set out, right? And I was just beating myself up because I'm like, okay, I wanted to hit this revenue target. And he looks at me and goes, what is your problem? You've been working part-time. You're making more money than what you did before. So who cares? Right? Like, why are you beating yourself up? And I'm like, oh, you're right. Like, it's a good reality check, because what I set out to do a year ago has changed, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so he's that support. So whether it's a friend, whether it's other entrepreneurs, you know, they say one of the biggest problems for entrepreneurs is loneliness, right?
Absolutely,
because you're on your own. You kind of think you're the only one in your business, all these kind of things. You have to have a support system in place.
Yeah.
The other piece is that you could try and go into it part-time. You know, there's ways to step into these things.
Dip your toe and... You
know, it's a little bit safe, but I think sometimes you get too comfortable in what you're doing, right? So that's where, if it's something that you know that's inside, that you're just like, I've got to do this, take the jump. You know, I think one of the things I learned too, again, it took me a lesson of losing my job. It's that people rebound, right? Just because you quit, perhaps what people are telling you, you know, like I was always told, oh, I have to be a doctor, a lawyer, or those kind of professions, right? You know, regardless of what you're hearing people say, whatever happens, you will rebound, and there's always options, right? Even too with my husband, he was just like, you know, if worse comes to worse, if this entrepreneur thing doesn't work for you, you can go back to full time, right? Like there's still jobs out there for you. We will figure it out. If disaster happens, we can sell the house. Like, there's always options, right? Whether you want to face them right away, you can figure it out, right? And so that's where you've got to sometimes take the leap and just trust yourself. It's so rewarding. I find that I've got more confidence. I have recognized how much help I can give people, because sometimes when you're working in the corporate world, you're working with 20 people who kind of do similar jobs to you, right? And you're thinking, how do I compete with this? How do I stand out?
Am I a cog in the wheel?
Yeah, exactly, right? And there are so many people who need help out there, right? So there is a market for everything. It's the support in Calgary, and probably in a lot of other cities, is amazing. You know, I connect with a lot of marketers who technically are my competition, right? We might compete for the same jobs, and heck, I think we actually have competed for the same jobs. But you know what? They're also the ones I've had one say, hey, I actually am too busy. Here's a job. Would you take this on?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you have your biggest supporters
Yeah.
from the people who are your competition.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's something that, again, if you have an inkling of it, if there's something in you, I should probably say a little bit more than inkling, because you're
Yeah.
going to have to stomach through a lot.
If you got a passion.
A passion for it,
Yeah.
you got to go for it. And because otherwise you're just going to regret it.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not going to know. And so it's kind of like, give it a go for it. Don't look back, and try not to limit yourself, because I think self-doubt is one of the biggest things that I find with entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
You know, I had one guy call me after speaking at a conference, and we just had a half an hour chat, and he's like, oh, I don't know if there's a market for my job, for what I do. And I was like, where is this lack of confidence coming from?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on? So we had a good half an hour talk. And the very next day, he emailed me. He said, thank you for talking to me. Thanks for talking to me about that client I told you about. I went back to him and I locked down a deal. Right?
Awesome.
And it's just like, those are things like we limit ourselves so much.
Yeah,
and it's like, once you can push yourself into this uncomfortable zone and go out there,
Yeah.
it's amazing things will happen. Right?
Yeah, that's where the good stuff is.
Yeah. So that's where, if you have something there, try it. Talk to people who are in it, right? There's a lot of groups like on Facebook. There's a few different groups like young entrepreneurs. There's
Yeah.
Calgary entrepreneurs. There's ATB centers have a lot of sessions open, right?
Yeah, they're great.
There's a lot here. You just have to go out and network.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Awesome. Well, you heard it here on the Rebel podcast. I just had the most amazing conversation with Kat Lesperance. Thanks
thank
so
you.
much for coming down.
thanks for having me. It's been great. I feel like we could keep going.
Oh, I know.
Just
Oh, my
nerding
God.
out about marketing.
Yeah, exactly. And if I didn't have to go host another show, I would.
It's good for time check.
Yeah, that
But
was,
yeah, no,
that
this
was
is great.
lovely. Coming up next, Dave Burns from the Introverted Networker talks about making the most out of networking opportunities by understanding your strengths and limitations. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, it's good to know. We talk about his life as a professional speaker. We even talk about football and rugby and Australian rules football and so much more. Check out next week's episode, Rebel every Monday.